Have you ever asked yourself, maybe I could be avoidant and I don't know it? My guess is maybe no. Many avoidant people do not know they are avoidant. They just don't. As I said in many videos, years ago, back in grad school, I would have 100% told you that I had anxious attachment. And I had no idea until I deep dived and got to know myself and went through a lot of traumatic things that actually I have a more disorganized style. And there's a vast spectrum within disorganized. There's so many parts of that style that can vary. But at the heart, it is about having both anxious and avoidant behaviors. It was the avoidant part I did not know about. So this video is for you and anyone you love. But honestly, if you think, I'm going to skip this one, I think I'm just anxious, please stick around, because if it's not you, it might be someone very close to you. And especially if you're anxious, you might also be unconsciously, subconsciously attracting essentially partners who have avoidant qualities. And round you go in that dance. So these are 7 more subtle signs to ask yourself and unpack if you might have a more disorganized attachment system. Now, really quickly, as a licensed psychologist, this is has always been one of my favorite topics, attachment was, until I started learning about autism and how all of that fits in. And there is a lot of overlap between what can be considered autistic traits and avoidant traits. And I think many therapists see autistic traits, high masking autistic traits, through the lens of trauma. Well, you don't have trust for people because of your childhood, and that's why you're avoidant. And yes, may be the case, but also autism. So please go check out videos I posted about the overlap between autism and trauma. And I don't think I've done one specifically on attachment styles and autism. I don't think I have, but I will do that. Really quickly too, at the end of this video, there are several videos, older videos, but I think they're still pretty good videos on how to help you heal from these attachment styles. So I'll link them down below. And last thing I'll say, because I'm in a sassy mood, which is if you can't deal with the fact that I chit-chat sometimes before giving you the data, then maybe I'm not the person for you, right? I get it. But I'm not here to just data dump at you. I want us to have a relationship, and I also need to be myself when I do it. And so I appreciate all of you so much, and I promise I'll work on it, but sometimes it happens. All right, I'm not sure, we're probably 2 minutes in now. Let's get to it. First of all, avoidant attachment, just a couple things to keep in mind. It's described as, there's a childhood where the parents, were completely dismissive, and yes, that can be the case. But what I really want to do is paint a picture for you of what often it looks like. Now, number one, many of us were, and this especially is true for certain generations, but we were often physically left alone for many reasons that the parents justified, right? Crying it out in our cribs, being latchkey kids, all of those things can contribute. And attachment at the core is about the very beginning of life, the earliest interactive patterns between a baby and a caregiver. But there can also be secondary and tertiary attachment figures, meaning coaches, teachers, aunts, uncles that can sculpt and shape you. And remember, whatever style you have, it's going to be enacted and play out differently based on the other person's attachment style. The reciprocity or lack thereof is going to highlight or reduce potentially certain parts of you. And also that fact can be helpful if you're choosing to work on your style and you and your partner are both self-aware and engaged and connected and curious and committed, okay? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that this style is defined by in what the early literature calls repeated maternal rejection. Now, it's not necessarily rejection. What it is that a child's bids, attempts for connection to activate attachment essentially were dismissed. They didn't understand that you were, crying because you needed them. They put you in your room for crying and gave you something to cry about. They really rewarded positive emotions like being easy and independent and playing quietly beside them, and did not reward or ignored and didn't even validate often or shamed or whatever other big emotions like negative emotions called, crying, anger, things like that. So again and again and again, what these parents are doing is they are often rewarding autonomy. They're rewarding you be emotionless, right? Because of their often own discomfort with emotion. And so you quickly learn that, if I have a big tantrum, that's not going to get my needs met. Maybe no one's coming. And one of my favorite little anecdotes is from The Strange Situation, which is the big research study we often refer to that looked at caregiver interactions, which were initially mothers, between babies and moms. And we found the first three styles: secure, anxious, and avoidant. And then later the fourth style, which was like cannot classify, they actually classified, is that in the avoidant attachment babies, when the mom got up and just left the baby alone with the stranger in the toy room, many of these babies didn't even cry. They might look across the room and follow her with their eyes, but it was almost like, like I'm not going to have a tantrum like the anxious, clinging babies because it's not going to do anything for me. They'd already learned to deactivate those needs. But here's the thing. When researchers measured their internal biological states, their cortisol levels, I believe, their heart rates, whatever those markers were, and there were several, they were often just as upset as the babies who were having meltdowns. They just weren't showing it. And this is what I want you to keep in mind with so many avoidant people. Yes, they can be completely disconnected from emotions, but that doesn't mean they're not in there, and or they're just containing it so much because there's no space in which they learned that got them anything. And that's how these signs are going to play out, almost as a defense against no one's coming. What do you mean you're going to be there for me? No, thank you. I don't even believe that's possible. Okay. Number one, feeling deeply unknown, like no one has ever truly known you, and or there are only one or two people that you've really let yourself be known with. And it's probably more likely to be a friend than it is a romantic partner because there's less threat in that. But deep inside, it's like no one really knows who you are. And or you've, over time, as I've talked about, I think I was better with friendships in some ways when there was the glue of like college or partying or whatever. But as I grew and as I understood myself more and more, I realized there was a kind of a wall there. And that wall made it harder and harder for me to not only seek others to get to know, but to let them know me. So deeply unknown, also common in autistic traits as well. Number two, a strong sense of independence, a thing where people with avoidant attachment, we take pride in that part, or if we have parts of ourselves, it's like we can't even fathom a world in which, what do you mean you can't do that? What do you mean you're not going to try that? What do you mean you can't go to a movie alone or be alone? Now, this can have some nuances, but at the core, we were rewarded for our high levels of independence. And we also don't want to give that away. And that's another reason why this can be a hard style to treat. If you come in and just start saying, well, stop being independent, it's like, no, thank you. That's how I survived. I'm not giving that up. It's just about learning to integrate and be more reciprocal with your time, your love, your money, whatever it is in terms of relationships. So a strong attachment to your independence and autonomy, which is often rewarded also in the world. Number three, you often have a deeply critical inner and outer self. And so there's a high inner critic and a high level of outer criticism. And as I've talked about, this can be common in multiple styles, but it's like, I'm not good enough and neither are you, right? It's this constant sculpting and shaping of, okay, I didn't get my needs met, so maybe deep inside there's something wrong with me, but I don't trust people, and so maybe there's something wrong with you too. And or there can be this wiring towards just being critical and judgmental. That can be a bond with emotionless parents as well. Maybe they were really good at crap talking other people, and that's how one of the ways they use distancing from being emotionally really in a situation. Number four, being a self-soother. So you self-soothe through substances, through binge watching, through being alone. And I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing. It's just that the way you regulate is you don't look to others. This whole idea about co-regulation and someone else is not going to feel like you even want to do that, let alone feel safe. So a lot of what you do, whether when you're extremely emotional, as you isolate, you shut down, you can't access emotion, or you deal with it alone, crying your eyes out, but no one sees it, there's a lot of self-soothing going on. Number 5, deep inside, vulnerability is seen as a weakness. And or like the ability to access emotions isn't something that you want to let others see in you, and often isn't something you feel comfortable seeing in others. Now, for me, for example, I think because I have the anxious part and the disorganized part, my whole life I've been regulating other people, and I do that for my job, as I just talked about in the video. And so it's really easy for me to sit with other people's emotions, but it took a long time to build trust and safety, even with my own therapist, given all the things I've been through, being online, all those kind of things. So there's still that dynamic, though, where I think people see it as, oh, you're vulnerable, so avoidance, just leave you. It's like, no, they just learned it wasn't safe, and they don't know how to do it. No one sat there with them and witnessed back and forth an experience of emotional reciprocity. And that is how we can go through life, especially if we have those anxious qualities too. So we know how to be with people and give what they want and get their needs met. But like I'm saying, deep inside, that wall from the beginning, as I talked about, is very common. And so it can make us disconnect from ourselves and relationships when it feels like it's hitting too close to tapping into that number 1 quality of being deeply seen and known. Number 6 is being conflict avoidant. So a lot of us, because in our homes, there was no discussion of things. I also do believe that for many of us, we lean towards avoidance, but perhaps in our home, there was a lot of eggshell behavior. And so we don't ever want to go there. We disengage all the way from that. And that can become a situation where conflict, as I've talked about, feels unsafe and dangerous, and it demands vulnerability, whether it's asking for a raise sometimes or, whatever it is, that might be too scary. And so there can be a strong sense of conflict avoidance. And the last one is sort of relational. It's that we don't necessarily have realistic expectations of relationships. And when we engage with people, there's not a real understanding of like reciprocity. In the beginning, we can sort of fake that and give them what they need. And this is why people get, I think, so upset with the true avoidant with no self-awareness and things like that. It's that we really just don't really know what to expect in a relationship. So we walk into it sort of having these unrealistic ideals about what my role is and your role is, what vulnerability plays and things like that. And even when we get into something like arguments, there can be a need to escape and leave. Anytime it gets too big, we want to often leave and shut down. And there's nothing wrong with taking a break, but you cannot just say, I'm not discussing this and leave and not trigger your partner. So if you are avoidant, it's important to, set boundaries for yourself about how you're going to work through conflict. Honestly, if you can get yourself to therapy, it's incredibly helpful. These are things that you can do. I have worked with several clients who have told me from day one, I know I'm avoidant. And it takes, frankly, a while in therapy to get them to even give me all of the goods that help me understand who they are, because that guard and wall is up. But when someone has this quality and they want to be in a relationship, there can be a lot of beautiful work done. It's not always easy, but it's possible. So I made a video, like I said, on how to heal avoidant attachment. Please check that out down below, because I think those skills are important. But at the core, it really is about understanding that we were rewarded for being emotionless, unseen, independent, autonomous, and taking care of our own needs. And so it's a pretty tall order to ask someone to not be that way when maybe in their childhood, that is the only way they survived. And so that's important to keep in mind, and also to hold yourself, if this is you, accountable, and or your partner. And it's not about saying you're bad, you're avoidant. It's just saying, look, we can't have a real relationship if we don't work on these dynamics. And so each of you have to own your part in that, right? That is the only way it works. So anyway, those are what I think are 7 often subtle signs that you might be avoidant or someone very close to you. So thank you for being here. Don't forget to check out my new Substack as I've been posting. I posted my second article there. Every Sunday, I'll post a new newsletter. It will have video content that I'm not posting anywhere else. At some point, probably audio content like meditations or just like a podcast version. And then articles on the art of isolation and being healthier in your body. I love to cook, as I've talked about, and things like that. So it's a bunch of things: trauma, autism, isolation, food, and pop culture. Often I just reviewed the films Baby Girl, and I just talked about The Substance yesterday. But I'll be doing more of that content also on Honora and Lioness and all those other great, amazing shows. So anyway, thank you for being here. Please stay safe and well, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.